Hello and welcome to the Last Edit podcast, a weekly film podcast with myself, Citizen Sleeve, and my quite fabulous friend.
Silver Hawkins.
Now, this week we have both decided to go on a bit of a Coen Brothers odyssey, beginning with their very first debut feature, Blood Simple from 1984. Now, before I get into the synopsis, there's some very cool background history with Blood Simple. Now, the Coens actually went to film school with Sam Raimi and Barry Sonnenfeld. They all kind of knew each other. And Raimi was the one who was, at the time, with Bruce Campbell as a student, making a shorter version, a student version of The Evil Dead. And they did this in order to get funding for it, to show this shorter movie around, to get funding to make what would become The Evil Dead. The Coens saw this and thought, hey, that is so cool. We want to do that. We want to make our own film. And so what they did was make a 2-minute trailer, which is a short sequence of what landed in Blood Simple in the end. And it actually starred Bruce Campbell. Now, I knew some of that, but until I went back and did further research, I didn't quite remember all of it. But it's so interesting to me that those guys all kind of worked off each other. And Sam Raimi kind of led this independent, indie guerrilla filmmaking charge back in the day. And the Coen saw that and thought, yeah. And in order to get the funding, they were actually going out and cutting grass, lawns, those kind of things, just to get the funding to be able to make that short trailer. And that short trailer got the funding, and boom, we landed with the wonderful Blood Simple. Now, it was originally written with Emmet Walsh in mind, and at the time, he is a wonderful character actor, greatly missed. He's one of the greatest in cinema, I think. The script was essentially written with him in mind, and it's incredibly interesting because at the time, obviously, they didn't have much money. So what he wanted was $700 a day, and this went on for about 8 weeks. The shoot itself, and he didn't want checks. Like the Coens initially gave him checks, and they're like, "I don't know who you are. You're like students. Your checks might bounce, so I'm not going to take checks." So every day they would give him $700 in cash. And I found out, which is really interesting, he didn't want to leave all this cash in his hotel room. So when he's in the film, in character, he's actually got more and more cash every day from the cash that he's being given to perform by the Coen brothers. I just thought all of that background is so interesting. It's such a rich history of indie filmmaking, and it's just a wonderful story about how this film got made. Okay, so let's
It's
jump
very
into
reminiscent of the Super Generation in the 70s when
yeah,
George Lucas, Scorsese, Spielberg, all
Brian
and
De Palma,
Coppola
yeah.
all kind of grew up and knew each other.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it just fascinates me the origins of this kind of thing, like Robert Rodriguez, the way he started, things like that. It always fascinates me. So the synopsis is actually quite simple for what is a quite complex film. Abby and Ray, played by John Getz and Frances McDormand in her very first screen role, are having an affair behind the back of Abby's husband, Marty, played by the wonderful Dan Hedger. Dan Hedger is another wonderful character actor. Now, Marty knows this is happening and enlists a private detective. And this private detective is played by Emmet Walsh. It's a twisty, dark thriller with horror elements. It's incredibly
We should say his
tightly
name is
paced
Mark
and
Emmett
structured.
Walsh for those who don't know him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll know him from Blade Runner. If he's the police chief in Blade Runner. That's probably his most famous role. But he's a wonderful, wonderful character actor. And it's a twisty thriller. It's very, very tightly paced. It's very tightly edited. It's actually maybe one of the best edited or tightly edited films I've ever seen. Now, I hadn't seen it for probably 15 years at least when we watched it the other night. And I know it's good. I've seen it plenty of times before, but sometimes you just forget how good Blood Simple is, and how many of the traits and stylistic elements of what then will go on to become two of the greatest film directors of all time. You can see them. You can see the seeds throughout the film. It would later see in things like Fargo. It's a wonderful template for their style and what they would later go on to do. So, going back to it after so long, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to sort of set up for Blood Simple because it is the first Coen film. It's also, in some ways, it's the most unique film in their entire catalog because it's sort of separate from a lot of the stuff that they usually do. There are none of the, like, the Coens are really famous for their sort of weird, funny side characters. Um, there are no weird, funny side characters in Blood Simple. You could make an argument, I guess, that Mark Emmett Walsh's character, the private detective, is kind of in that vein, but he's more of a main character than a side character.
Yeah, only
Um,
really the barman, and he's not really in it that much, and he's not that quirky. It's not like "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," where you've got crazy, quirky side characters all over the place.
right, but there are some things here that prove to be like Coen staples. Like the first is this is also like this is Frances McDormand's first appearance. Obviously, she goes on to marry Joel and then appear in nearly every single Coen Brothers film. And then there's Carter Burwell, their sort of court composer. He's basically the Ennio Morricone of the Coen Brothers. He scored every Coen film outside of Inside Llewyn Davis. I think that's the only one he didn't score because there were scheduling conflicts. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that you see in their later films. There's also like the introduction to the film is very much like the introduction to No Country for Old Men, with with a character giving a monologue about life and the state of the world and the state of existence today over these panoramic shots of Texas. Because of course the movie is set in Texas, and they use a lot of panoramic shots to sort of show the desolate isolation of Texas and just like the vast size of the state, which is, I think, it's difficult to comprehend for a lot of Europeans how large Texas actually is.
Yeah,
It's like the size of Germany, pretty much. Like it
yeah,
is.
that's ridiculous,
It
isn't it?
is
It's a
basically
country unto itself,
yeah. In
almost.
terms of size, it is a nation unto itself. It's more than twice the size of Denmark. So yeah, it's they use that to great effect, like for the isolation, and yeah, like you said, just a lot of the setup of a lot of the shots here, where they do a lot of panning,
Mm.
which they also do in later films. And because of their close association with Raimi, you also see a lot of like Sam Raimi techniques in here, like the quick zoom pan is here that Raimi is so fond of. And it's going to make another appearance again in the next movie, Raising Arizona. Um, and yeah, and of course the big Coen element here that you see in pretty much all of their movies is the central character and the conflict of misunderstanding that sort of leads to events spiraling out of control. And that is really sort of the central tenet of most of the Coen's movies. That sort of misunderstanding leading to conflict, leading to further conflict and spiraling outside of sort of the inept control of the main character, who thinks they sort of have a handle on things, but really they don't. And it is like every single Coen film is sort of a celebration of absurdism, which is one of the reasons I'm so fond of them. Like the Coens
Mm.
are my favorite filmmakers, and that is a very large reason why we're embarking on this odyssey. But yeah, I mean, returning to Blood Simple, I had seen it, I think maybe 7 years ago last time, maybe less. So I remembered it fairly well. But I mean, it's just a great suspense movie. It builds tension really, really well. It's fairly easy to follow, even though there is a lot of sort of crisscrossing in terms of the plot. But it's still somewhat easy to pick up who thinks who's dead, who thinks which character is actually who. Um, it is, and like the reveal at the end when Frances McDormand thinks that she's actually faced against her husband, Marty, and learns that no, it's someone else entirely. And the way the movie sort of plays that reveal is it's a great payoff.
It is. It's a really, really fantastic reveal. I was going to go back to the music for a second. The one main piece of music throughout, the main motif, is absolutely sublime. I kept
Yeah,
saying it.
it's a
I kept
piano
humming it.
theme.
I kept humming it while we were watching it because it's so incredibly catchy. It's got a melancholy about it, and it suits the cinematography, the lighting, the feel of the film so very well. And Barry Sonnenfeld, who I mentioned, of course, went on to become a director and worked on a lot of subsequent, I should say, Coen brother films. I think that's sublime as well. Some of the shots, not just the panoramas, but indoor in the club. We should, I guess, back up a little bit. So we kind of start with Abby and Ray driving in the rain, being followed, not very subtly, by the detective we find out later, Private Eye, and
Driving a Beetle,
driving a Beetle,
Volkswagen.
who you mentioned last night, appears in a number of different Coen Brothers films as well. A bit like that. Is it the Pontiac that's in almost every Sam Raimi film? Which I
Right.
always
No,
find
I mean
hilarious.
it's only one other Coen brother.
Oh, it's
It's
only
only
one.
in
Okay.
Big Lebowski where the private eye in that movie also drives a Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh, I cannot wait to get to Big Lebowski. I know it's a way off, but I adore that film. Okay, put that to one side. But the way the nightclub is like, so basically they're being followed. The Emmet Walsh goes to see Marty in the club he owns, this kind of dingy dive of a place that, off some beaten track in Texas, and tells him, and he pays him for the information, and obviously Marty is absolutely furious because he's being cheated on. And the way some of the shots are, they're just beautiful. The purple hues, the orange hues that bathe the scenes, the way, one of the most beautiful things in this film, and it shows just how masterful the Coens were then and went on to become, is the framing. There are so many shots that are framed in such a unique, off kilter way. It's so interesting the way they frame things. The shots behind people looking up at a fan, with their elbows out, very tightly framed. The way he cut that they cut to certain close perspectives and then back out again to those panoramas. It's so wonderfully well paced and tight, and the framing is so exquisite at times. It's just a glory to watch.
Yeah, I mean there is something to be said there because another thing that sort of sets the Coens apart as filmmakers from a lot of others is just their efficiency. Like they very very rarely, I don't know that they actually ever have gone over budget over time.
No, I don't think
Um,
they ever have. No.
because they are so on the money. Like they every single shot is set up not by the I mean it's set up but it's not fought up by the director of cinematography. It's already fought up by the Coens themselves. Every single movie they do is very very heavily storyboarded. It's very very heavily scripted for the dialogue all the way down to like the ums and ahs of each character. There's virtually no ad libbing or improvisation in a Coen Brothers movie. It's all there on the page, and that makes it extremely easy for actors to work with because they already know what they have to do and what's expected of them, and what they have to deliver on because it's just there on the page and they can learn it by heart and as a result the Coens need fewer takes. They get through the shooting days fairly quickly. And yeah,
Well,
it's sort of a testament to just their level of vision that they are able to sort of deliver to that exact detail and specification each time and just get through it in a way where everyone really sort of comes together because everyone understands their vision. They're able to communicate it to the crew, to the actors, in a way where yeah, it just all comes together, and that's also a reason why they've basically worked with the same even like crew down to like the gaffers and sound engineers and whatever. Like the same staff on nearly every movie that they've done. They just bring the family back together every time because everybody knows what's expected of them. Everybody knows what they're meant to deliver on. and that is something that really sort of sets the Coens apart from a lot of other filmmakers, and it really shows in that even as they switch between directors of photography, between Barry Sonnenfeld, who eventually moves on to become a director in his own right, to Roger Deakins, like a lot of their sort of distinct visual style in terms of the shot framing that you're talking about sort of retains,
Yeah.
regardless.
Well, the
So
case in point is the director's cut. The director's cut is actually, and this is unheard of. This is unheard of. Most director's cuts are longer than the original, often bloated by comparison, with stuff that simply isn't needed. Blood Simple's director's cut is shorter than the original because they tightened it up. That's just unheard of. It just doesn't happen. A director's cut is never shorter than the original piece is. I just find that fascinating. How tightly they script and pace everything and edit everything and know exactly, as you said, vision wise, what they're trying to put on celluloid.
yeah,
It's absolutely beautiful.
yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that makes them so singular. And and the fact that they then couple this with, I mean, they do write like Blood Simple is also an example of when they write for a specific actor. Like you mentioned, The Private Detective is written specifically for Mark Emmett Walsh, and they do that in other in coming in their coming films as well, where they
John
specifically write
Turturro,
for
John
one
Goodman,
character, Albert
absolutely.
Finney, John Turturro, yeah, John Goodman in another movie, and Frances McDormand, of course, in her
Yeah,
really central film Fargo. So so that's something they do to great effect as well. And of course, it also because they're so easy to work with, because every actor knows what is my place, what is my role, and and the Coens are just generally pleasant to sort of be around. They're decent human beings. Every single actor in Hollywood wants to be in a Coen Brothers movie. It is sort of the
absolutely they do.
most.
Yeah,
It is sort of one of the most desired, along possibly along with Scorsese. Like one of the most desired roles for an actor to take is like that's what you hear every single time they take that role, and it does come off as sincere that wow, like I'm actually in a Coen Brothers movie. It's similar to like a Star Wars fan finally being in Star Wars, like Ewan McGregor finally becoming Obi-Wan in Phantom Menace,
yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
realizing that childhood dream.
It's it's a masterclass in how to debut. I mean, I can't think of many stronger debut films. You know, like
I mean,
even Scorsese, Boxcar Bertha is nowhere near as strong as Taxi
there is
Driver. He
one we've
needed another
there
film.
is one we've covered uh, that I think is up there, and but unfortunately for that director, it sort of proved he proved unable to match it since, which is The Lives of Others, which was a debut film from Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck. And he hasn't really been able to match that since, that to reach that level again. Whereas the Coens have just consistently retained that level since. Blood
Yeah, and
Simple.
often keep surpassing themselves.
Yes,
You look at their filmography, and I mean, my
I
God. Right?
mean
Okay, refocus.
that
Blood
is
Simple.
one of the sort of the more frustrating things with the Coens, because every time you sort of rewatch a Coen film, it tends to like become your new favorite in the lot.
Yeah, I
Um,
absolutely agree with that.
where
They're so good,
there's
and
a
they
very
cover so
very
many
clear
genres.
case of recency bias when it comes to Coen films. The exception for me being with Miller's Crossing, just because I think, as we've talked about when we covered that film, that movie is on a level in terms of its script that I just haven't really seen anywhere else, even in other Coen Brothers films, because that movie is just so tight.
Yeah, very, very. So I guess we should pick up where the plot kind of is. So Marty essentially finds or goes to see Emmett Walsh's character, the private eye again, and wants Abby and Ray dead. And he kind of accepts. And we should say Emmett Walsh's character in this is very slimy and kind of disgusting, and is always dripping with sweat, and has a fly on him here and there, and is just an uncomfortable. He has a really maniacal laugh, and you know he could do nasty things, and so he's hired, and and then things kind of the plot twists and turns a little bit throughout. And what eventually ends up happening is he sneaks into the Ray's house where Abby and Ray are sleeping and staying. He sneaks in and he takes a
And it's
photograph
just say,
and
Abby
steals a gun.
Abby wants to run away. She wants to
Yes.
run away and leave Marty behind. And so Ray is basically helping her. He's giving her a ride. And then instead they end up talking, and then they end up in Ray's place, and they end up sleeping together.
Yeah. So after he's taken the photo, he goes back to see Marty with this evidence that he's killed them. And all he's actually done through old school photography trickery is make it look like they have been killed. So he hands the envelope over to Marty, who's sat at the back of his office in the bar he owns. Again, with that wonderful kind of neon lighting saturating the frame. And he takes it. He gets the 10 grand they agreed on, gives that to him. He takes one photo out very slyly and puts it into the safe before he locks it, and then gives the envelope back with the rest of the photos in. And then Emmet Walsh switches and does a betrayal. He takes the gun that he stole from Ray's house and he shoots Dan Hedges' character Marty in what looks like the heart, and he just slumps back in his chair. But he's not quite dead yet, as we find out. And that's really quirky and interesting as well. And then Ray comes to the bar, and
He's set there by I forget her name.
Abby.
Abby, yeah. He's sent there by Abby because her gun is there. And so he's there to pick up her gun. And her gun is like she's convinced that she left it behind, because when he went to take the photographs of them, Mark Emmet Walsh's character, he stole. No, wait, no. He comes back after. Another time.
Yeah.
And then he steals Abby's gun when he breaks in, because he has plans to use it, which he does. He uses Abby's gun to shoot Ray, so that she will get framed with the murder and he can walk away. And so when Ray arrives at the club, he finds Abby's gun and he finds Ray's shot, and so his natural conclusion is that...
Not Ray, Marty.
No, Marty's shot, yeah, sorry. And so Ray's natural conclusion is that Abby shot Marty, and now he has to sort of try and cover it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And what ensues after that, I mean, just... It's absolutely brilliant. So Ray has to find... He starts mopping up the blood on the floor with his shirt, and we both said at the time, just find some towels, seriously. It's the middle of the night, no one there. And he then starts having to try and...
There is somebody. Like, somebody arrives like 5 minutes later.
Oh, yeah.
The other
one of
bartender.
the barmaids, yeah. And so he has to try and, on the fly, work out how to get rid of this body. So he drags the body out of the club, he puts it in the car, puts it down in the back seat, tries to cover it. He grabs the gun, as you said, and he drives off to this kind of open field that's there's no crops or anything yet, but it's kind of been pre-sown, ready for it. The harvester's been out there to get the soil sorted and everything. And he starts... Well, first of all, Dan Hedges, Marty, wakes up, kind of. And when he's off trying to work out where he's going to bury him, he starts crawling out of the car, and Marty's like crawling really slowly. And Ray finally clicks on and goes, "Oh crap," and realizes he's still alive and kind of flips him over. And then this massive 18-wheeler truck is coming in the opposite direction. And so he very, very quickly grabs him, puts it back in the car, and then gets out of the way.
And we should say this is sorry to interrupt, but this is where the most famous shot, probably of the film, is set, is when Marty is crawling down this sort of lonely sparse Texas country road with like wide open landscape on either side, and it's night time, and the only real illumination is from the headlights of Ray's car. And he's crawling down the road as Ray is sort of approaching him from behind with a shovel, to basically bash his head in and finish him off. And of course, there's also the accompanying sound effect of the metal head of the shovel being dragged across the asphalt
The asphalt, yeah.
as Ray is walking. But of course, Ray cannot actually finish him off, both because the truck from the oncoming direction is coming, and will see him. So he has little time, and he has to get Ray back into the car. But also because he doesn't have it in him to actually kill Ray directly himself, or Marty himself, directly himself.
Yeah, and then we end up with him. Ray drags Marty, and there's another wonderful shot of it, just a pan across from the car to where he's trying to bury him. So he's kind of dug up this shallow grave in this massive open soiled field, no one around, completely on his own, and he just plonks him into the grave and starts shoveling soil in while Marty is still alive, which is the shot, like I said, the pan across from the car and the headlights over is absolutely wonderful. They're just such a good sequence. So then he dusts himself off. He goes home. He's got blood on his shirt. He's obviously really worried and anxious and doesn't know what's happened.
Marty does try and shoot him as he's
but
as he's
no
lying in the ground, because he does actually have a gun on him. Nobody Ray forgot to check in being that busy. Also, he assumed Marty was dead. So
yeah,
but yeah, Marty takes out the gun, tries to shoot him, but there are no bullets. Either that or
not one in that chamber.
Yeah,
at
or
least.
one in that chamber at the very least. Yeah, and so I think it's actually Abby's gun, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was only loaded with 3 bullets, and it is because there isn't one in that chamber when he tries, but he only tries it the once, and then Ray pursues continues to bury Ray alive, basically, because I keep saying Ray, Marty alive, because he can't actually take on the full culpability and responsibility of killing Ray. So he just basically sort of buries him, and that's sort of a way for him to compartmentalize and say, no, I didn't really kill him.
Yeah, I didn't kill Marty. Someone else killed him. I just buried him.
Yeah.
So when he goes home, obviously he's completely freaked out, and he realizes very, very quickly, Abby did not shoot Marty. Somebody else did, and he doesn't know who. And then he really starts freaking out. The barman, I think, comes to his house because of prior phone calls he's got from Marty about the cash he's owed, and don't let him steal it and things like that.
We should also say, sorry, but there is this underlying distrust between Abby and Ray that's sort of sowed by Marty when Ray goes to see him after the private detective has told Marty that Ray and Abby are having an affair. And so Ray actually goes to see him to sort of resign his job as bartender at Marty's club, and get his 2 weeks of back pay, which Marty naturally refuses. And so Marty tells him that she's gonna look at you with those wide-eyed innocent eyes, and she's gonna tell you, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do nothing," and that she basically sleeps around with everybody. And Abby's been getting these phone calls that are just hang-ups. There's no one on the other end, no one speaking on the other end. They just call up, and and when she picks up and says something, there's a little pause, and then they end the call. And of course, being somewhat paranoid, Ray thinks that that's another lover that she has. So there's this sense that that she's with somebody else, and that she's just playing and exploiting him. But he's okay. He's even okay with that. He's okay with being exploited, because presumably he does actually love her. So there is that.
And that's only
that entire
exacerbated
element
later as well.
Yes.
Because once the barman but the barman eventually tells Abby, "Stay away from Ray. There's something going wrong here. So he's a
Yeah,
bad guy. He's done something bad." And so that relationship becomes even more tenuous.
because
There's a
she
wonderful shot.
because of course
Uh,
she knows she didn't kill Marty, and
yes,
so when Ray comes back from burying Marty, and his shirt is quite noticeably soaked in blood on one of his shoulders,
and she seems oblivious, at
up to
least
a
for the
point,
beginning.
yes.
Yeah.
But because she doesn't quite want to like face that reality, I think. But it does sort of dawn on her eventually that Muddy's dead and Ray probably killed him, and not like is he gonna kill? He's capable of murder. Like, not is he gonna kill me? And she becomes extremely scared of Ray for that
It's a
reason.
wonderful shot before we start kind of getting towards the end in the apartment. And Ray is on the left-hand side of the frame, and Abby is on the right-hand side. And there's a big dividing pillar in between. And on the left-hand side, it's cluttered. There's lots of stuff everywhere, as if to give us a visual metaphor for Ray's state of mind at the time. Completely all over the place, scattershot. And Abby's side is much clearer, with just a bed and one other thing. And I love that use of the items within the flat and that separation to provide that visual metaphor. I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, and like in the meantime, like the private eye has sort of been keeping an eye on things because he realizes he actually left behind important pieces of evidence. Like one of the photos in the envelope that Marty handed him is missing. So Marty actually kept one of the photos for himself as insurance, and it's locked away in his safe.
Yeah, and
Like
his lighter,
there's yeah, there's
which
only
he
this
leaves on the
empty
table.
paper instead of the photo. And the private detective also left behind his very distinctive lodge lighter, like from his elk lodge, like silver lighter, that he put down on the desk. And then Marty arrived with some fish he presumably caught that morning, and puts them down on the table over the lighter. And as a result, Emmet Walsh, the private detective, doesn't see the lighter when he takes off and forgets about it, and nobody else, for understandable reasons, feels like going through fish on a desk and looking at what's underneath them.
Not after the
So,
amount of time they'd been there. My God,
yeah.
man. We said it at the
So,
time. Oh, God.
in the Texas heat,
Yeah.
with only the ceiling fan as air conditioning, presumably, in that office. At least I didn't see any air conditioner in there.
No, that was a very dingy, sweaty, horrible dive that makes you feel grubby just looking at it. So I'd
Right.
imagine those fish would have smelt horrible after just a couple of days.
So yeah, so nobody notices, but he notices as he's back in his sort of basement studio, his dark room, and he notices that as he's burning the photographs in the envelope, he might notices one photo is missing, and he notices that his lighter is also missing. So he goes back to watch the club, and he notices Ray making his way there and emptying the safe, where he finds the doctor's photograph of him and Abby dead, and then he follows Ray from there.
Yeah. And then we start kicking into essentially the end sequence. So Ray goes to Abby's flat, and Abby is shit scared because she thinks Ray killed Marty. But he's kind of stood at this window with the lights off. Sorry, it's the other way around. Abby comes into the flat, he's already there. And he's got the lights off because he thinks someone's watching him. And he's very paranoid. And Abby's like, "What's going on? What are you doing?" He said, just don't turn the lights on. But she does. And he starts freaking out. And lo and behold, the private detective, Emmet Walsh, is in the building opposite at the same kind of line with a sniper rifle, and he shoots Ray in the stomach, and he falls down and dies. And Abby suddenly realizes, got nothing to do with Ray. There is someone who has killed Marty and is trying
No,
to kill
she
them
thinks
now.
it's Marty.
Oh, of course, yeah. She doesn't know it's the private detective
Yep.
until a little bit later. So she immediately, well, not immediately. We were like, run, run, and she was like, oh, stats, like shocked for a minute, And then she turns the light off, gets down, and realizes she has to kind of get out of there or do something if she can. So at this point, the private eye, she can hear, has come across from that building into this one, and it's on the floor. She can hear his footsteps as he moves through the flat trying to find her. And I mean, you can discuss this part because it's, as you said at the time, it's my American History X moment. Like for me, whenever I see that the teeth of that character in that scene at the start of American History X on the curb, I go, oh, and shudder. And this scene for you is one of those moments in cinema.
Yeah, I mean, Abby runs off to hide in the bathroom and locks herself in there. Uh, she looks out the window to see whether she can make the jump, but they're way, way too high up for that to be really a feasible opportunity. And so Mark Emmett Walsh comes in, and for I'm not quite sure why. Actually, he doesn't just break down the door to the bathroom or try to.
Hmm.
But instead, he looks at the window. Maybe he thinks he can be more sneaky that way or something. And he goes to the open window on his side of the flat, and he notices the bathroom window, which is closed. And so he starts to lift up the bathroom window. And Abby then grabs hold of his hand, pins it on the windowsill, and then she takes a knife and just jams it right into the center of the hand and lodges it onto the windowsill right there. And he sort of writhes with the hand. He can't pull it. He can't move it anywhere because the knife blade holds his knife there, clean through the bone, and yeah, it looks decidedly uncomfortable. It feels
Well, I said at the
decidedly
time, the bit that got
uncomfortable.
me is he's kind of sideways against the window he's at in the other room, and obviously his hand bent round. But his ear is just on this broken bit of window. His lobe is just catching it. It's like, oh, his ear's going to come off there. Eventually, he gets his gun and he shoots through the wall next to him with the bathroom. Just shoots, trying to make a hole and trying to kill her at the same time. So eventually, he makes this hole. He busts his other hand through, and he pulls out the knife. And then he basically tries to go round, and as he's coming round the corner towards the bathroom door, which presumably he would then kick down or something, she's got her gun, and she aims marvelously well. I don't know if she's had prior practice. Maybe that's a prequel.
Well, she
But she
also
shoots
she makes her way back out
yeah
onto the hallway and then
into the hallway.
through the main entrance to the apartment.
Yeah, and then shoots once through the door, and manages to shoot the private detective again in the stomach, I think, or the chest, is it? And he
Yeah,
drops
she
to the
shoots him
floor.
through one of the actually one of the bullet holes he's already made in the wall, which he uses to sort of gauge where he is.
Try and orientate, yeah.
And then she
And then,
actually delivers on that shot, which is pretty
yeah,
impressive.
very much so. We were both like, "Whoa, that's an impressive initial shot." So he falls down. He knows he's dead, and is staring up at the base of a sink as it's kind of slowly dripping on it. And the last shot we see is him staring up, and this one droplet of water very, very slowly wobbling and then falling. And then we cut to the
Yeah,
credits with the
but we do get
electric blue almost
but
credits.
but before that we do get the reveal where she basically calls out to who she thinks is Marty.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the private detective goes, "Oh, I'll tell him if I see him."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it dawns on her that no, that wasn't Marty. That was just somebody else. Like who the fuck?
yeah. What the hell is happening?
Yeah.
It's
And then the movie ends
it's a
on a fairly
wonderful film.
cheerful old classic
Yeah,
tune.
which has been played in the film prior as well. We should say as well, it's not just the score in this that's good. The music selections are some are ironically chosen, some just fit a scene, but they're all so wonderfully used. And they really envelop you in this dark thriller-esque world, but with moments of odd humor, which is again is very, very Coen's. It's just such the only word, the best word I can describe for a debut like this is a masterclass. It's a masterclass in how to make a thriller. Everything is tight. Everything is framed wonderfully. The script is absolutely brilliant. The casting, my God, for Frances McDormand's first role, it's quite an understated role until the end. But then you've got John Getz is brilliant in it. Dan Hedaya is wonderful as this sleazy bar owner, and Emmet Walsh as the detective just steals the whole film. He is magnificent in this film.
And it is kind of funny with Hedaya because he does usually play very macho masculine characters, and Marty is a character who sort of tries to be that, but
Yeah.
he completely fails at it.
Well, there's that bit in the bar near the start where he's trying to come on to a girl
Yeah,
who
at
he
the
thinks
bar.
is a friend.
Yeah,
Who he thinks is a friend of the barman, and the girl's just like, "No, no, you're all right." And
yeah.
he's like, "Really?" She's like, "Yes, really. Bye."
Yeah. Also, his methodology is not sound.
No,
For that, to put it mildly.
no, absolutely,
He comes off as more than just a little creepy.
an absolute slimeball. Yeah, very, very much so. It's
But
just
yeah,
such.
he tries to sort of puff himself up and make himself tough,
Yeah,
which of course also he can actually kill Abby and Ray. He has to hire the private detective for it. And you get the sense it's not because he wants to sort of get away clean in that sense and distance himself from it. For that reason, you do get the sense that it's because he can't actually do it himself.
well, there's that bit again, kind of near the start when Marty goes over to Ray's, and it's just Abby there initially, and he grabs her by the throat and starts threatening her and all this stuff, and then Ray comes into the situation, but she basically knees him in the balls,
Yeah.
and he stumbles outside onto the front lawn, heaves over, and is just sick all over the place. It's just those moments, he postures as if he's this big man who can do what he wants, but he's not at all. He's not at all.
No, and I mean their affair is basically a fairly blatant exhibition of that fact.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't match his own vision of virility and masculinity and presents a threat to that, which is ultimately, I think, why he decides that they need to die. Like, at first, he sort of tries to sort of accept it and move on, but it just doesn't sit right with him. That the humiliation of it. It's one humiliation too far.
Well, when the private eye gives him the photos initially, he also is starts retching and can't believe it and has to go and be sick again, those kind of things. So it just builds into that form of
Well,
that
no,
character.
that the photos from them being dead. Yes, correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He starts retching then, even though he's wanted this to happen, he still can't quite handle it. It was such a pleasure to watch this again, and what a wonderful way to start off our cinematic Coen Brothers Odyssey. Because so many of the traits that have become known in their films and the quirkiness of it are established here and then just escalated or built upon throughout the film and then later films. It was an absolute pleasure to watch. I came afterwards. I felt so nostalgic. We were messaging for a long time. I was looking up to my shelf above me where all my old film kind of books are, because Blood Simple is a film I first came across when I was at university. I hadn't seen it until that point, and I remember it so distinctly. I told you at the time it might have been 15 years, but little things that pop out in the film. Like, there's a bit near the start when the bartender gets onto the bar, and you just see a close up of his Converse shoes doing a little shuffle.
yeah.
And I remembered that immediately. Just these little moments
There's
throughout
also
the film.
like an adult dancer, let's say, who performs on the bar, but we only see her feet.
Yeah.
We only see her ankles and people looking up at her. Which is also, I mean, that small scene is also such a huge marker for the Coens, because the people looking up at her, the people at the bar, each look completely distinct and have this sort of each their own way of watching her, as it were, that sort of informs their own stories, which is what the Coen brothers are so good at. They're so good at infusing characters with personality and traits and background and history in really just a few seconds, and sometimes with like just one line of dialogue, sometimes with no dialogue and just visual cues or visual tells, and that's something they completely excel at, and that is another example of that in this movie.
Well, as you mentioned, again near the start, there's that businessman in the grey suit. He only has one line. I can't quite remember the line now, but you said at the time, this guy looks so blasé that he's kind of interested but not interested about what he's seeing, and you get so much from that. And as you said, one line, and we can read so much into that character.
Yeah, I mean, it is like the character work is really where the Coens excel, and for me, like character is what drives a lot of fiction. So that is probably the main reason why they are like my favorite filmmakers, because I don't think anyone really does character better or in more interesting ways or more engaging ways than the Coen brothers.
No, and I think you look across their filmography, the genres they keep bouncing between everything from musicals to westerns to thrillers to
Screwball
the
comedies,
breadth of
yeah.
their work is absolutely wonderful, and you can see it. You can see all the little elements that make the Coens what they are. The genesis of what the Coens are in this movie. I can't recommend this film enough. It's 80 something minutes long. It's
Yeah, I mean that is
incredibly
that is that
breezy.
is that is the other thing with Blood Simple. Like, Blood Simple is over in a flash. Like
Yeah,
it is,
yeah.
you blink and it's gone. 80 minutes, which is already a short run time, but just the pacing of the movie makes it feel like it's just a half-hour television show
Yeah,
episode that you just went through.
yeah, it
Like
moves
that
so
that is
quickly
that is how
pace-wise.
tightly paced it is. It doesn't. It's 80 minutes, but it doesn't even feel the 80 minutes. It feels much shorter than that, because
It does, it does.
it
It
just
feels
goes
like an
by.
hour almost, really.
Yeah,
It's that quick. And so much is happening all the time. It's not like occasionally, as you said, we'll have the panoramas where we'll take a look at Texas and there'll be long shots and stuff, but mostly it's tight close-ups, mid-shots that are moving quickly with pans that are moving across the frame, and it goes by so quickly, and at the end you're like, whoa,
yeah. There's no
and then
fat
you get that
at all.
electric blue credits at the end, which with the song as we mentioned, which is just fantastic. Well, I love this movie. I adore it, and I'm so glad you certainly asked if we could go on a bit of a Cohen drive, because I don't know when I would have watched it again. Do you know?
Right.
and and as you said at the very beginning of this, when you see a Coen Brothers movie, that one becomes your favorite until you watch the next one.
Yeah.
And right
Kind of.
now, and all I could think about last night after we watched it was Blood Simple. It was just in my mind. Every little element of it. The music was playing over in my mind. As I said to you at the time, I even went to sleep by putting the main theme on, because I love it so much. So I can't recommend this enough. If you've even got a passing, even if you're not a Coen's fan, even if you've never seen a Coen brother film before, this is one of the tightest, best made debut features ever, and it's one of the best thrillers ever made. It's an absolute masterclass. I keep saying that word for a reason, because it's that good. Don't hesitate. Right now, it's available on the BFI player. And now I think that's only in the UK. I might be
Yeah.
wrong. You might be
It
able to
is.
access it in different countries. It's just UK. But you can get it. You can get it on Blu-ray. I think now there's a 4K version that they did a couple of years ago that restored it a little bit and actually tightened it even more from the director's cut, if you believe that, a little bit more. So, I can't recommend this enough. This is an absolute cinematic joy to behold.
It is, and quite frankly, so is the next film in line, which is Raising Arizona, which stars a very young, chaotic Nicolas Cage.
Yep.
In
Holly Hunter.
what I think is probably his best part ever, which is
It's
saying something.
right up there.
It
Yeah,
is
absolutely right
also
up
the
there.
Coens proof that they can be very, very, very funny when they want to be. Um, it is like it's a movie that has a very, very soft spot in my heart. I love it to death. It's just a great time every time you sit down and watch it, and it's a very feel good movie as well. It has a very chipper, optimistic tone to it, despite in spite of some of the subject matter that it deals with. It's not as dark as a lot of other Coen comedies, though. It doesn't have as dark a sense of humor. It's kind of sanier, more cartoony. So I am going to be interested to see if the the last Coen Brothers movie you see is your favorite is gonna hold up for Raising Arizona for you. But
That'll be interesting. Yeah, that's one I haven't seen in 15, 20 years. It's a very, very long time since I've seen that.
yeah,
Well,
and it also stars, I should say, Holly Hunter as well.
yeah,
In the
another
other,
one of the
as the other
Coen's
main
alumni,
character,
if you like.
and she's also
Yeah.
actually in Blood Simple as just a voice on an answering machine.
On an answering machine. And Barry Sonnenfeld is actually a very small part in Blood Simple as well. I can't remember part of the club somewhere. He's in there. He gets a little character as well. Just the alumni, the Coen's alumni, as you said, that they always work with. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, that was Blood Simple. It's a wonderful, tight movie. It's a great thriller. Get your ass out there and watch it. And join us next week on the Last Edit podcast for Raising Arizona, which I think was 1987. Don't forget, we have already covered one of the wonderful Coen Brothers catalogue of films, and that was Miller's Crossing.
Yes.
Silver's favourite film. So check that out. I'll put the description for that in the link below. And check us out on Spotify, Anchor, iTunes, get our audio versions, and talk to us in the comments. Have you seen Blood Simple? Do you love the Coens? What's your favourite Coen movie? And if you haven't seen Blood Simple, go and watch it, come back to us, and talk to us about that in the comments as well. I've been Citizen Sleeve.
And
this is my wonderful friend. And thank you so much for watching. Take it easy, folks.
Take care.